I remember that day vividly, the day Clara came into my home carrying her newborn, with Mark by her side. They had a gleam in their eyes, one of triumph and malice, not the warmth you'd expect from new parents. I stood there, frozen, as Clara spoke, her voice dripping with condescension. "I've fulfilled the dream Mark had, Helen. Something you couldn't do," Clara said, her smirk wide as she rocked the baby gently. Mark nodded in agreement, his eyes not meeting mine. "Our little Zoe here is going to be a stunner, just like her mom. Maybe a model or an actress someday," Mark added, his voice betraying a hint of pride that felt like a dagger to my heart. "It's time we head back. We've shown off our happiness to Helen, the singleton. I'm really satisfied today," he continued, exchanging a look with Clara that I could only describe as vile. I was dumbstruck, watching them use their child as a weapon against me. My inability to have children was a sensitive topic, one that Mark knew all too well. Yet here he was, flaunting his new family in my face, with Clara leading the charge. "Why? Why do this?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. Clara laughed, a sound so cold it sent shivers down my spine. "Oh, Helen, it's not about the child. It's about showing you what you couldn't give Mark, what you couldn't give us." Mark remained silent, his complicity as loud as Clara's words. I felt a rage building inside me, a mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. How could the man I spent nearly 2 decades with be so cruel? As they turned to leave, I found my voice. "You think you've won, but this isn't happiness. It's shallow and empty." Clara paused, turning her head slightly, her smile never faltering. "Happiness is subjective, Helen, and right now I'm on cloud 9. They left, leaving a silence that echoed through the empty halls of the home I once shared with Mark, a home that now felt like a tomb of my former life. That night, I couldn't sleep. Their words, their smug satisfaction, it all replayed in my mind, fueling a resolve I didn't know I had. Mark and Clara had shown their true colors, and it was time for me to show mine. I wasn't going to let their provocation be the end of my story. No, this was just the beginning. The beginning of their downfall. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, a plan began to form. A plan not just for revenge, but for reclaiming my dignity and showing them that I, Helen, was not a victim of their cruelty, but a survivor. The next morning, I woke up with a clear purpose. I was going to fight back, but not in the way they expected. I was going to rise above, and in doing so, ensure they got what they deserved. But first, I needed evidence. Evidence of their betrayal, of their true intentions. And I knew just where to start. The journey ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and revelations I was perhaps not ready to face. Yet, I was determined. For too long, I had let Mark's words and actions define me. It was time to redefine myself on my own terms, and so, with a newfound strength, I began to lay the groundwork for what was to come. Mark and Clara had underestimated me, thinking they could parade their betrayal without consequence. They were wrong. Very wrong. The next few days, I acted with a singular focus, gathering evidence of Mark and Clara's affair. It wasn't difficult. Their arrogance had made them careless. I found emails, texts, photos, each piece a stab to my heart, but also a brick in the foundation of my plan. Then, an unexpected opportunity presented itself. Mark had always been meticulous about his digital footprint, but in his newfound bliss, he'd become sloppy. I discovered he had a meeting scheduled with Clara at a fancy downtown restaurant, a public display of their relationship, no doubt. It was the perfect chance to confront them. I arrived at the restaurant early, securing a spot where I could watch them unnoticed. Soon enough they walked in, laughing, touching, like a scene from a movie. A movie about betrayal. As they settled into their seats, oblivious to the world, I approached their table. Clara spotted me first, her smirk fading into a look of surprise. "Helen, what a surprise," Clara managed, her voice faltering. "Surprised? You shouldn't be. Not after the show you two put on at my doorstep," I replied, my voice steady, my heart racing. Mark looked up, his expression a mix of confusion and guilt. "Helen, this isn't what it looks like," he started, the lie so blatant it was almost laughable. "Oh, save it, Mark. I'm not here to listen to your excuses. I'm here to give you both a warning," I said, leaning closer. "Your little secret? It's not so secret anymore. I know everything." Clara regained her composure, her smile returning, but it was strained. "And what do you plan to do with that knowledge, Helen? Ruin us? Please, you don't have it in you." Her words, meant to belittle me, only fueled my resolve. No, Clara. Thus, I plan to make sure you face the consequences of your actions, both of you. Mark's face paled, the reality of the situation dawning on him. Helen, please, let's talk about this. We can sort it out. There's nothing to sort out, Mark. You made your choice. Now, you'll live with it, I said, turning to leave, their stunned silence music to my ears. As I walked away, I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't look back. I had made my stand, and there was no turning back now. The next steps required careful planning and precision. My next move was to visit a lawyer. The lawyer, Miss Avery, listened intently as I laid out my evidence and my intentions. She was sympathetic but also brutally honest about the challenges ahead. Divorce was messy, and given Mark's position and resources, it wouldn't be easy. But I'm not just fighting for a divorce, Miss Avery. I'm fighting for justice. For my dignity, I explained, my determination clear. Miss Avery nodded, understanding the stakes. Then we'll make sure we're prepared for whatever they throw at us. It's not just about the legal battle, it's about ensuring you come out of this stronger. With a plan in place, I left her office feeling a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in years. The road ahead was daunting, but for the first time, I felt like I was in control of my destiny. But the real surprise came the following day when a package arrived at my door. Inside, I found a flash drive and an anonymous note. Thought you should know the whole story. Curiosity piqued. I plugged the drive into my computer and was met with a barrage of documents, photos, and videos. Evidence not just of the affair, but of financial misconduct by Mark, leveraging company resources for his rendezvous with Clara. As I sifted through the files, a plan began to form. Mark and Clara thought they had played me for a fool, but they were about to learn they had underestimated Helen. This was more than just betrayal. It was corruption, and I had just the evidence to prove it. The game had changed, and I was now holding the winning cards. It was time to play them. Armed with the evidence from the flash drive, I arranged a meeting with Mark's company's board of directors. Walking into the corporate building, a sense of unease mixed with determination settled over me. This was where Mark had built his career, and I was about to expose his darkest secrets. I was greeted by the board with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. As I connected my laptop to the projector, I glanced around the room, my resolve firming. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here not just as Mark's wife, but as someone who has uncovered significant misconduct within this company, I began, my voice steady despite the shaking of my hands. The room was silent, all eyes fixed on the screen as I presented the evidence, transactions, emails, hotel receipts, all pointing to Mark using company funds for his affair with Clara. The board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to shock and anger as the presentation went on. Mark, who had been sitting confidently at the table, looked as if he was shrinking with each slide. Helen, this is a serious accusation. Are you certain of the authenticity of this evidence? One of the board members asked, his tone grave. Absolutely, and I believe a thorough investigation will confirm everything I've presented today, I replied, locking eyes with Mark, who refused to meet my gaze. The meeting concluded with the board promising a full investigation and Mark being suspended pending the outcome. As I left the room, Mark caught up to me, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. Helen, how could you do this? You've destroyed everything, he hissed, grabbing my arm. I pulled away, my gaze cold. You did this to yourself, Mark. You thought you could betray me, use the company for your own selfish desires, and get away with it. You were wrong. Leaving Mark behind, I walked out of the building feeling a weight lifting off my shoulders. I had taken the first step in holding him accountable for his actions, but I knew this was just the beginning. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The company's investigation confirmed my evidence, and Mark was officially terminated from his position. The news made headlines, and Mark's once respectable reputation was now in ruins. But Clara wasn't going to let things slide so easily. She confronted me one day in a cafe, her eyes blazing with fury. You think you've won, Helen? You've ruined Mark, but I won't let you get away with this. Clara spat, her voice low and threatening. I haven't done anything that you and Mark didn't do to yourselves, I replied calmly, sipping my coffee. You both played a dangerous game and lost. It's that simple. Clara leaned in, her voice venomous. This isn't over, Helen. I'll make sure you regret ever crossing me. I met her gaze, unflinching. I'm not afraid of you, Clara. You've already shown your true colors, and I have nothing left to lose. Bring it on. Clara stormed out of the cafe, leaving a trail of whispered speculations in her wake. I knew this was far from over, but I also knew that I had already survived their worst. Whatever Clara planned, I was ready for it. As I left the cafe, I realized that this ordeal had changed me. I was no longer the woman who could be manipulated and betrayed without consequence. I was stronger, more resilient, and ready to face whatever challenges came my way. The battle lines were drawn, and I was prepared to defend my newfound strength at all costs. Clara and Mark had underestimated me, and they were about to learn the true cost of their actions. The drama and the battle for revenge were far from over, but I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the architect of their downfall, and I would see this through to the end. The fallout from Mark's termination was immediate and brutal. The press had a field day, and Mark became a pariah in his professional circle. With his career in tatters, our divorce proceedings began. I expected Mark to fight dirty, but the evidence I had against him left him with little room to maneuver. Our first meeting with the divorce attorneys was tense. Mark tried to maintain a semblance of control, but the situation was clearly out of his hands. "Let's get this over with," Mark said through clenched teeth as we sat down at the conference table. "I agree. The sooner the better," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Mark's lawyer, a slick, middle-aged man named Richard, laid out their initial offer. It was laughable, considering the circumstances. "We believe this is a fair division of assets, considering both parties' contributions to the marriage," Richard said, sliding a document across the table. My lawyer, Miss Avery, glanced over the document and scoffed. "This is hardly fair, considering Mr. Smith's misconduct has not only ended his career, but has also brought significant emotional distress to my client." Mark glared at me, his anger palpable. "You're going to bleed me dry, aren't you, Helen?" "This isn't about money, Mark. It's about accountability. You seem to forget that your actions brought us here," I said, meeting his gaze without flinching. The negotiations were long and arduous, but eventually we reached a settlement that felt like justice. Mark would have to liquidate some of his assets to meet the terms, a fact that seemed to sting him more than anything. As we left the attorney's office, Mark caught up to me in the parking lot. "I hope you're happy, Helen. You've taken everything from me." "You did this to yourself, Mark. I just stopped turning the other cheek," I replied before walking away, leaving him standing alone. With the divorce finalized, I felt a chapter of my life closing. But there was still the matter of Clara, who had been ominously silent since our last encounter. I knew she was planning something, but I was determined not to let her drag me down with her. A few weeks later, Clara's plan became clear. She launched a smear campaign against me, spreading lies and rumors in a desperate attempt to salvage her own reputation. It was pathetic, but some people were swayed by her words. I refused to engage in a public mudslinging contest. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life, investing my energy into new projects and distancing myself from the toxic drama that Clara was trying to create. However, I couldn't ignore her completely. Clara's actions were becoming more desperate and erratic, bordering on harassment. It was time to put an end to her vendetta once and for all. I arranged to meet Clara in a public place, a busy cafe where her antics would be witnessed by many. She arrived, smug and confident, clearly believing she had the upper hand. "Ready to beg for mercy, Helen?" Clara sneered as she sat down. "I'm not here to play games, Clara. I'm here to tell you it ends now. Your attempts to ruin my reputation are pathetic and transparent. Everyone can see through them," I said calmly. Clara's confidence wavered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. "You think you can intimidate me? I have nothing left to lose." "That's where you're wrong. You still have your freedom to lose. Harassment, defamation, spreading false information. I have enough to take legal action against you, Clara. And I will if you don't stop," I warned. Clara's facade crumbled, revealing the fear underneath. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me. I've had enough of your games. It's over, Clara. Move on with your life if you can," I said, standing up to leave. Clara was silent, her eyes following me as I walked away. I knew I had finally gotten through to her. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. I had reclaimed my life, but the scars of betrayal would take time to heal. As I stepped out into the sunlight, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, I was looking forward to discovering what it held on my own terms. Life began to settle into a new normal. My projects flourished, and the shadow of my past with Mark and Clara seemed to recede with each passing day. However, peace was short-lived. Word reached me that Clara was back in town and she wasn't alone. I braced myself for what was to come, refusing to be caught off guard again. The confrontation came sooner than expected. I was at a community event when Clara appeared, as if out of nowhere, her presence casting a chill over the warm, sunny day. "Helen, darling, it's been too long," Clara said, her voice oozing fake sweetness as she approached me. "I have nothing to say to you, Clara. Whatever game you're playing, I'm not interested," I replied, turning to leave, but she stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "Oh, come now, Helen. I just wanted to catch up. After all, we have so much history together," she said, her smile sharp as a knife. "I'm not interested in revisiting history, especially not with you. What do you want, Clara?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. Clara's demeanor changed, her smile fading into a look of smug satisfaction. "I just thought you should know Mark and I are back together, and this time nothing will stand in our way, not even you." Her words were meant to wound, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. "Congratulations, Clara. I hope you're very happy together. Now, if you'll excuse me." As I walked away, I could feel Clara's eyes boring into my back, her silence more telling than any words could be. It was clear she was plotting something, but I was determined not to fall into whatever trap she was setting. The next few days were tense. I bolstered my defenses, both legally and personally, preparing for whatever Clara had planned. The attack, when it came, was both brazen and underhanded. Clara went to the press, spinning a tale of a bitter ex-wife harassing the happy couple, trying to paint me as the villain in their twisted narrative. Her interviews were filled with lies and insinuations, designed to tarnish my reputation and elicit sympathy for herself and Mark. I was furious, but I knew that responding in anger would only play into her hands. Instead, I contacted my lawyer, ready to fight back with the truth. "We'll issue a statement refuting her claims, backed up by evidence. Clara's attempts to manipulate public opinion won't stand up to scrutiny," my lawyer assured me. The statement was released, detailing the truth of our history, backed by undeniable evidence of Clara's lies and manipulations. The public's reaction was swift and overwhelmingly in my favor. Clara's narrative crumbled, her credibility shattered by her own deceit. But I knew this victory was only a battle in the ongoing war. Clara wouldn't give up so easily, and neither would I. I was ready for whatever she threw my way, my resolve strengthened by each challenge. As the dust settled, I realized that this ordeal had changed me. No longer the woman who could be betrayed and discarded, I had emerged stronger, more resilient. Clara and Mark had tried to break me, but instead they had forged me into someone new. I was Helen, and I was unbreakable. Let them come with their worst. I would face it head-on, and I would prevail. The path ahead might be uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was the master of my destiny, and nothing and no one could take that away from me. A few weeks after my public rebuttal of Clara's accusations, I received an unexpected invitation to a mutual friend's art gallery opening. The buzz was that both Clara and Mark would be there. It was a deliberate setup, no doubt, a showdown they presumed I wouldn't dare face. They were wrong. I arrived at the gallery, the air thick with anticipation. Whispers filled the room as guests speculated on the night's drama. I kept my composure, greeting our host before scanning the crowd. It didn't take long to spot Clara and Mark, ensconced in a circle of onlookers, playing the part of the besieged couple. Clara spotted me first, her expression a mix of surprise and disdain. Mark's reaction was more subdued, a hint of unease in his eyes. I approached, my steps measured, my heart calm. "Helen, what a pleasant surprise," Clara said, her voice dripping with insincerity. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Clara. After all, I hear we have you to thank for the drama of the evening," I replied, my tone light, belying the tension. Mark finally spoke, his voice strained. "Helen, let's not do this here. It's neither the time nor the place." "For once I agree with you, Mark, but let's be clear, any drama tonight is solely on Clara's shoulders, I said, locking eyes with him briefly before turning my attention back to Clara. Clara laughed, a hollow sound that echoed oddly in the crowded room. Please, Helen, you think you've exposed me, but you've only played into our hands. Mark and I are stronger than ever. Your little games can't touch us. It's not a game, Clara. It's my life. A life you both tried to destroy, but here I am standing strong. Can you say the same? I challenged, my gaze unwavering. The circle of onlookers had grown, hanging on every word. Clara, sensing she was losing ground, leaned in, her voice a venomous whisper meant only for me. You may think you've won, Helen, but this isn't over. I'll make sure of it. Threats, Clara? Really? You should know by now they don't work on me. Not anymore, I replied, stepping back, ready to walk away from their toxicity once and for all. As I turned to leave, Mark's voice stopped me. Helen, wait, please. I paused, facing him, an eyebrow raised in question. I'm sorry for everything, Mark said, his voice barely audible over the murmurs of the crowd. It was the closest thing to a concession I would ever get from him. I nodded, accepting his apology, not because it changed anything, but because it was time to close this chapter of my life. Goodbye, Mark. Goodbye, Clara. I wish you all the happiness you deserve. With that, I walked away, leaving the whispers and stares behind. The night air felt refreshing, cleansing, as if with each step I was walking further away from my past and into a future of my own making. In the weeks that followed, Clara's attempts to retaliate were half-hearted, the fight gone out of her. It seemed my confrontation had finally broken her spirit. Mark disappeared from the public eye, his apology at the gallery the last I heard of him. I had emerged victorious, not through revenge or malice, but by standing up for myself, by refusing to be a victim. Clara and Mark had sought to destroy me, but in the end, they were the architects of their own downfall. As I moved forward with my life, I did so with a new sense of purpose and strength. I had faced my demons and won, proving to myself and the world that I was not someone to be underestimated. I was Helen, and I was finally free.